morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming here on a Saturday. Many of you I know came from other cities, from other states, even from other countries to be here to discuss Spanish art among some of the world's most preeminent scholars. My name is Anita Feldman. I'm the Deputy Director of Curatorial Affairs and Education. And I'd like to welcome all of you. And I have a few housekeeping notes to start. Your emergency exits are on the left. And the coffee and pastries are not going away until 11:30. The doors are closed, but you can still access them outside. You can also access the restrooms outside and to your left through the doors. So I mentioned that we have some of the world's most preeminent Spanish or scholars of Spanish art here today. Well, among them is our own executive director, Roxana Velázquez. You may know she joined our museum almost a decade ago. She was previously the director of the Museo, the Palacio de Bellas Artes in Mexico City. There she curated an exhibition on El Greco. She's also curated an exhibition on Rubens for the Palacio di Monte in Ferrara in Italy, on Ribera for the Museo Nacional de San Carlos, and of course on Goya. And here with the Art and Empire exhibition, a project of Michael Brown's that he's been working on for 5 years. We're so excited to be opening that exhibition and to have this symposium here today. Of course, Roxana also had a lead on that. And I'm very proud to have had my own small part in that project. But here today, I'd like to welcome to start Roxana Velázquez.
Thank you, Anita. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much for being here. It is, we cannot help ourselves but be so excited to see so many familiar faces, and sincerely welcome to your museum. I am so moved, so touched, and I would like to say many times thank you to all of you for being a part of the transformation of this institution. The excitement that organizing this project brought to us, the willingness to make this happen, the unwavering support from many colleagues, donors, and friends, both from the private and public sectors, from local and federal entities, and from more than 35 lenders, is indeed moving. So thank you all. Nationally and internationally, Art and Empire, the Golden Age of Spain, has been part of many conversations for the last 5 years. The media has talked about it and has even attributed the possibility of changing the perception of San Diego as not only being nice for the weather or the beaches, but also as an art destination. We believe in the path of excellence, we believe in the mission, and that the mission should always remain at the core. We know that the collection is the soul of every institution, and the collection reflects our community. We know that our museum has many, many strengths, but our Spanish collection is and has been one of those. We know that growth and transformation only happens when ownership and pride is felt by many. So thank you to all of those involved in this project. Thank you to the stellar team that I have the honor and privilege to lead at the San Diego Museum of Art. Thank you to Michael Brown, to all of the scholars that contributed with ideas, concepts, and essays at the article. And of course, with loans that were practically impossible to believe that they would arrive to San Diego. The exhibition, as you know, entails an original academic proposal that was created by our own Michael Brown. Michael Brown, congratulations. The concept of the Golden Age is a new concept extending the scope and the traditional concept, as was discussed yesterday, from the Iberian Peninsula, and analyzing multiple different aspects of that concept. Our pieces, the stellar collection that has been here since the foundation of the institution, today is being shown side by side with impressive pieces by Zurbarán and Rivera and many, many others that you would enjoy. Yesterday, we started this symposium with a keynote speaker by a dear friend and colleague, Gabriele Finaldi, director from the National Gallery of London, whom I would like to welcome today, this morning again. Gabriele. And today, we are about to enjoy the most interesting proposals from brilliant scholars of the Spanish and viceregal worlds from our country, from Mexico, from Europe. And I will take this opportunity again to welcome each one of you and thanking you for your wonderful work and for allowing us to revisit all these concepts and to think again and again of the Spanish Golden Age. We will be hearing from you. It is going to be a long but a wonderful, productive day. So I will be introducing each one of the speakers, and after each block, there are 3 blocks, we will have a session, a brief session of questions and answers. Feel free to ask our wonderful array of scholars whatever you feel like. And again, I would just end my brief remarks thanking you for allowing us to transformate this institution and to get it to the level our city, our community deserves. Welcome again to your museum. So I will start introducing Benito Navarrete Prieto, professor and chair of the Department of History and Philosophy at the University of Alcalá, who has focused principally on the study of paintings by artists from Andalusia and Madrid, as well as Spanish drawing in general. He has published extensively and curated a number of exhibitions. He has also served as director of cultural infrastructure and heritage for Seville City Council and has been a scientific advisor for the Diego Velázquez Research Centre, creating the Focus Foundation, curated projects. I have the great privilege of knowing Benito decades ago and seen the growth and all what you had brought to our scholarship. Benito Navarrete, welcome for the first time to the San Diego Museum of Art. The stage is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Roxana, for your friendship. For many times ago, I am proud to be part of your team, and I am very grateful. Thank you, Michael Brown, for this exhibition and for the concept to the Golden Age within a methodology of the global art. Thank you, Graciela Platero and Bailey Kane. This paper aims to analyze the importance of the image as a creator of iconographic models on both sides of the Atlantic, and as the finite element of a society, thus rejecting the idea of center-periphery and rather proposing the codification of a specific identity within a process of appropriation, despite using an image itself as a starting point. It is precisely the process of reinterpretation through vernacular components and different sensibilities depending on the cultural area where this image is assimilated as a product of appropriation, which exists in an understanding of the process of hybridism and cultural transfer. Most significant within this transference are undoubtedly images devised in Flanders, precisely because the earliest printers who settled in the Iberian Peninsula were German or Flemish in origin, and many of the copies of these northern prints made in Spain were disseminated through new world distribution channels. This transfer was not just determined by a new system for the representation of the visual image, but also by a new context, new ways of interpreting religiosity, and giving visual form
to sanctity, such as the biblical narratives that entirely depend on these models. An eloquent testimony is that of the Dominican Bartolomé de las Casas, who referred to the innate ability of indigenous South Americans to copy this image, with engraving clearly acting as a medium for the transmission of forms. They began to paint our image, doing them as perfectly and with as much grace as the finest artists from Flanders. The same idea was expressed by Motolinia in his chronicle. The arrival of the Christians was followed by the emergence of great painters after the arrival of the models and images from Flanders and Italy, which the Spanish brought. There is no other piece or image, however fine, that is not borrowed from and redone, particularly by the painters of Mexico, as it is there that everything good which comes from Spain ends up. Mestizaje, hybridization, and transculturation. It is precisely in the mechanisms on copying, interpreting, and appropriation of the image that we can see the originality and identity characteristic of thus the transfer of these models. Bring in mind one significant circumstance, namely the absence of notions such as artistic style or consolidated pictorial tradition. It is precisely this fact which made it possible to celebrate the evident originality in the process of adapting these models to the vernacular traditions of each geographical area in which the image was transferred, hybridized, or reinterpreted. It is in fact in the terminology that the essential issue lies. Grudzinski has defended both the term cultural hybridisms and that of mestizaje, when referring to mechanisms of the appropriation of the image. For the present author, the hybridism is not solely a sign of creative continuity, and it is rather the product of the movement of a structural instability of things. However, the hybridism is also the result of empathy and recognition. In the terminology of cultural hybridization, it is not necessary to see any negative implication or concept of imposition with regard to the appropriation of elements from one culture to another. In the same sense, Marcus Burke has defended the use of the term Irid Art when analyzing work from the Spanish and Portuguese colonies, emphasizing the capacity for resistance of the underlying indigenous strata in some specific zones. In this sense, I believe that it is not possible to separate the initial Spanish Empire or Spanish monarchy from its different viceroyalties as a cultural area in which these phenomena came about and were images moved around and acted as sources of inspiration as the bearers of a transportable visual repertoire, possessed of an autonomous existence between Spain, Portugal, and the South America viceroyalties. In this sense, it is significant that some images were particularly potent and give rise to the dissemination of a specific iconography, unifying the representational system, but at the same time resenting identity with regard to how that interpretation was made, creating distinct and autochthonous variants. The first that should be dismissed is the supposed dependence that has been seen, for example, between the artistic production of the viceroyalty of New Spain and painting in Seville. I believe that this vision, which was based on the idea of center and periphery, and which implied a superiority of artists from Seville in relation to those from New Spain, is a methodological approach that has fortunately been superseded and was not one that derived from the approach characteristic of traditionally Spanish art history. It is true that some artists went from Seville to New Spain or Peru and New Granada, and even the works of art were exported from Seville to the New World and had some influence. However, those paintings functioned in exactly the same way as a Flemish print, and it was in the reinterpretation and translation that we can detect the reaffirmation of the characteristic identities of the different pictorialities, precisely because the appropriation of those models was reinterpreted in different ways in different places, as we will see here. As a result, as Jonathan Brown observed, it is undeniable that indirect transference through work of art was of equal importance, and not just work from Seville, but other from Madrid and Flanders. In other words, this artistic circulation was promoted by the role played by the Spanish monarchy in his different territories, but the representation of those models came about in a different way depending on the specific area and on the system of this particular artistic tradition, abilities, canon, and vernacular traditions, an issue that should not be forgotten when interpreting the models that were employed in the different areas. It is precisely this mestizaje of the image that explains the different sensibilities on a global level when interpreting European sources, and this phenomenon can be explained even better in cultural areas characterized by the nose of fixed indigenous and local artistic form, as Grudzinski has noted. Nonetheless, in order to understand the concept of appropriation, I believe it's necessary to refer to the way in which the image was interpreted, emphasizing the canon, the color, and the technical skill through which that appropriation was released. In my opinion, it is here that this cultural mestizaje lies not in the image itself, but rather in the interpretation made of it. Nonetheless, Da Costa Kaufmann has detected some problems in the use of term mestizaje due to the racial origin of the term and the fact that it is seen to imply the eradication of the presence of one culture by another. Furthermore, in the present case, the model was generally European. As a result, for that author, this vision involves cultural production with racial content. The transmission of cultural tradition is not a genetic trait. For Da Costa Kaufmann, it is more appropriate to speak of cultural exchange or transfer. Transculturation emphasizes the importance of the indigenous and encompasses other elements which played an important role between Spain and South America and with the Low Countries and Italy as the intermediaries. This paper will thus aim to see how images devised or created in Flanders and Italy were reinterpreted in Spain, Portugal, and South America in a different way, despite being almost copied in all three cases. In this sense, it is extremely important to consider this method of appropriation, the constructor of the canon, as Luisa Elena Alcalá has recently proposed. What has one of the elements in the interpretation and transfer of the image which determinates is precisely an identity within the mechanism of appropriation in a global analysis that will help to configure the map of the artistic circulation. In his influential work, The Mediterranean War in the Age of Philip II, Fernand Braudel regret that we have museum catalogs but not have artistic atlas. Just as Peter Burke has set out the mechanism of the reception of cultural force by making use of concepts such as appropriation, this study will imply a single method when looking at different samples in which that form of assimilation and reception of the image is revealed, giving rise to an evident cultural hybridism which that atlas which will attempt to chart when emphasizing the construction of the geographic of image will also pursue Tomás da Costa Kaufmann line on research. This type of appropriation of European models through prints, illustrated books, painting, textile, tapestry, feather, and any other support is an evident form of artistic circulation. In addition to establishing a way of repeating the models of the mother country for reason of status, taste, of religious and doctrinal requirements. This is evident in this sheltered Bolsward engraving allegory of the Immaculate Conception based on a composition by Gerard Segers. The print, which was primarily known for being the three images of San Joaquin, a devotional cult promoted by the Jesuits, as the inscription of the image indicates, was probably made to be exported to the Philippines. It reads, all those who own and venerate this image of the glorious San Joaquin will earn all the indulgence of the Philippines. The prince was also influential in both Spain and the viceroyalty of New Spain, as it aimed to globalize and codify an image, emphasizing the early conception of the Virgin Mary with her parents, Saint Joaquin and Anna, as Sergi Domenech has noted, is assimilate or depends on the traditional iconography of the Holy Family in order to better interpret his key figure and explain her to new publics in earthly terms rather than as the Tota Pulchra. It was copied in the signet painting of the subject executed in Madrid in 1628 by Lorenzo de Aguirre, into painting executed in Mexico for the Church of San Jose and of the Jesuit in Puebla in a painting by an anonymous artist from the Museo Soumaya, in the polychromate alabaster relief by anonymous Quito artist now in the Museo Jacinto Gijón y Camaño in Quito, Ecuador, and in a painting by an anonymous Cuzco artist. It is such a paradigmatic example of the global dissemination of this iconography which does resort the widest possible public. A similar case, this process of cultural transfer also contributes to redefining the image with elements that are new in terms of identity or artistic personality. And it's here that the canon, color, and vernacular tradition acquire particular importance within the Atlantic world and the dissemination of images in the different cultural areas of South America. This phenomenon of the appropriation and interpretation in a local register of models and images, generally originating in Europe, mean that there was a logical awareness of different tastes and different markets, particularly among the workshops in Seville and Madrid that exported painting in New World. In many cases, Spanish artists were aware of what was appreciated in the New World and of the elements necessary when exporting a specific type of work in which the color and the subject derived from Flemish prints were the key of elements in their creation, and these were the predominant formulas. This is exactly what we see in these two unpublished angels presented here, Baraquiel and Uciel, painted by the most important people by Zurbarán, Ignacio de Reyes, is exclusively for export to the New World. The success of this painting is much more comprehensible if we bear in mind their function as decorative elements for religious performance on the Corpus Christi celebration, both in Seville and in the Cuzco and Bolivia. This is evident through a comparison with other work. The well-known painting for the procession of the Virgin of the Kings in Seville on the occasion of the Feast of the Assumption in 1662, and we can see related model with Zurbarán workshop for hanging. In Cuzco, in the performance of sacred plays, held to the market the feast of Corpus Christi, has Dean have studied, and Luis Eduardo Buffardin, and in the painting of the entrance of the Viceroy Morcillo in Potosí in 1716 by Melchor Pérez de Holguín. All these works reveal the importance of the hanging that decorated the settings for the events depicted, which were decorated with a range of motifs from landscape to painting of eremites, angels, male and female saints and civils, the type of work that were principally exported to New World, as the present author studied in the exhibition Zurbarán and his workshop, and in the 12 Tribes of Israel with Gabriele Finaldi. In the specific case of Cuzco, it is interesting to note that even the mobile structure depicted in this painting used for carrying the sacred image in procession were based on a Spanish model reproduced in the Valencian print that illustrates the text by Balda, Solemnes Fiestas que celebró Valencia a la Inmaculada Concepción, via prints by José Caudí, 1663. This is evident in the structure that supports the Virgin of the Candles, which is literally based on one of these prints. As such, explains the working method of the Cuzco painting, and it might be asked whether the theatrical setting is real or based on Balda's book, and thus whether this is a pictorial recreation based on sources that had arrived from Spain, or whether the support for the processional images in Cuzco were made on the basis of those in the Valencian book and used in the religious festivals there, which is also perfectly feasible. In this sense, it is extremely interesting to define which elements are susceptible to being assimilated or hybridized within an exchange of ideas, and what the aim is behind the appropriation, comparing similar processes in the Iberian world with regard to a single image. With that aim in mind, this study emphasized the importance of image as a unifier of iconographic types within a global universe, while also questioning the dependence of vice-regal models of Spanish ones by showing how Italy and Flanders become the creators and disseminators of forms that were appropriate on both sides of the Atlantic with a different sensibility. This will contribute to defining the originality and personality of these territories in which the image is hybridized. In this sense, it could be argued that the Spanish Empire was also dependent on European types of form. The case very now of the impact of the Archangel San Miguel by Martin de Vos via the print after it by Hieronymus Bierix in 1584, or the artist's original painting in the former convent at Cuautitlán near Mexico City, offers another clear example of cultural transfer and the unification of form. As Estefania Porras has noted, as viral, the power of the image become very widely dissemination through the print, and its influence was evident in Madrid, in the two surviving series by Bartolomé Román, one in the convent of Descalzas Reales and the other in the convent of Encarnación, as well as in the painting by Bela Cobo, now in the Museo de Bellas Artes de Córdoba, in the painting in Mexico City by Andrés de la Concha, in the painting in the Cathedral and the Church of San Pedro in Lima, and in a Hispano-Philippine ivory. All this work reveal the impact and appropriation of the image in works print based on a composition by Martin de Vos. But what we see is the introduction of interesting elements that help to emphasize originality and local interpretation, as well as the rapidity of dissemination. The success of the circulation of this image has been studied by Esponda Hernández Ginge, and once again offers a testimony of the channels along which the print traveled and of the artists who made use of it. It will be tempting to think that the image in Mexico City could have been directly reinterpreted by Andrés de la Concha through the imported original, although the date of this painting arrival is not known, and that both in Spain and Lima it was Bierik's print that was responsible for the transmission. However, it does seem that it was the engraving as a portable element of cultural dissemination that acted as a courier for the reinterpretation of the composition, eliminating the figure of the divide. With regard to the importance of this painting in New Spain, it is worth drawing attention to the information provided by the signature of the painting in Cuautlan, which emphasized the origin of the painting in Antwerp, Mertino de Vos and Tupiexis Inventor et Fecit 1587. The case of alteration and mutilation of elements provides a satisfactory manner of revealing local variants and thus the elements in which keys to identity presented themselves in the form most accessible and acceptable to the public. This is clear, evident in two paintings in Lima and other in the Church of San Pedro and other in the cathedral, in which the darker color is central to the reinterpretation. Also arriving in Lima were series of angels, such as those in the Church of San Pedro by the Madrid painter Bartolomé Román, similar to those mentioned above in the Descalzas Reales in Madrid, which were inspired by the same source via Bierik's print. The result is a group of works indebted to the same source in a single geographical area, but which had been conceived in their original place. Madrid and Lima, all converging now in Lima. It is quite clear that the life of the image themselves and the fact of artistic circulation could mean that these paintings were eventually reunited. Nonetheless, the reinterpretation and innovation is evident in the church, in the painting in the Church of San Pedro. Studying the appropriation of image as an alternative to imitation and emphasizing their own identity leads to further relativizing the concept of originality and relativizing an account based on centering periphery. Studying types of appropriation through the identity or anthropology of the image from its cultural area, it is a fascinating means of demonstrating that within the study of artistic skill, notion of quality, virtuosity should not always be taken into account, but rather the way in which these images were transmitted and the manner in which individuals reflect the scene's identity in cultural production, so the vernacular tradition. It is precisely the power resulting from the inclusion of vernacular tradition which explains the intent to democratize or adapt certain images in order to make them comprehensive to local audience, both from the viewpoint of the meaning of the religious image with regard to the portraiture. This is the case with the appropriation by the painter from New Spain, Juan Rodríguez Juárez, in his painting of Santa Rosa de Lima with the infant Christ and Donor, Denver Museum, which function in the same way as the reinterpretation discussed about the Archangel San Miguel from the Church of San Pedro in Lima. This is a clear example of identification between a saint born in South America and the female donor, as Ilona Katsu has pointed out. An example of this desire of adapt typology with arrived from Spain, probably for reason of social prestige, is the portrait of the John Joaquín Manuel Fernández de Santa Cruz by Nicolás Rodríguez Juárez in the Museo Nacional de Arte in Mexico City. As become evident, it is a comparate to the portrait of the Duarte Pichol by Juan Carreño de Miranda. Within an analysis of the global history of artist objects as a cultural product, this study will thus aim to analyze the process of circulation of this image through print and illustrated books as powerful tools of the transmission of images and ideas, but also how this change, modification, and transformation came about and who intentionality promote. The result is to confirm the interaction and power of certain groups, defining the power of attraction and dissemination of image, and the ability to see and enter society reflected in the term thanks to this process of